Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. All right, quickly, let's switch gears to the Penn State side of things. You know, and Penn State fans, let me just say this. Before we go all in on James Franklin, like I was the guy, I tried to argue against the narrative all summer. I was the guy, I really believed this year was going to be different for Penn State. They finally had the quarterback. Don't believe all the negativity around James Franklin. They just haven't quite been good enough in previous years. And this was the year that they finally get over the hump. For people who are new to the show, I did pick Penn State as well as Michigan to make the college football playoff. Really felt like there was a scenario Michigan goes 12-0, Penn State goes 11-1, or vice versa, and both teams can get in. And so I bring it up because I tried to defend Penn State. A few weeks ago, they lose to Ohio State. And that was kind of when I said, you know what? I just don't think it's going to happen. Not a believer in James Franklin, not a believer in what he is about. But let me also say this. Saturday has to be rock bottom. Saturday has to be rock bottom for Penn State fans because of everything that went into it from the Michigan side of things, all of the chaos around the program. The game was there for the taking, and you simply couldn't do it again. Realized during the game, maybe after the game, James Franklin he's Big Ten Mark Richt, excuse me. I was gonna say Mark Stoops, Mark Richt. He's Big Ten Mark Richt. He is the guy that can win all the games that don't matter. He can beat the Indianas and the Michigan States and the Rutgers and the whoever, but put him in a game with teams that have equal or greater talent in a big moment. And what ends up happening? It's the same thing every single year. Gets nervous, coach is scared, coach is afraid, makes weird decisions. And I thought Saturday was one of the most embarrassing coaching displays from a $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 million a year coach that I've ever seen. Let's go ahead and dive in. I think the first part that you have to be frustrated as a Penn State fan, besides the loss, obviously, how it happened and the fact that, let's be honest, like I think what Michigan did was incredible. All the chaos, Sharon Moore being thrown into the fire 90 minutes before kickoff. It doesn't change the fact, though, that Michigan was essentially trying to give you the game. I mean, when Michigan doesn't throw a pass in the stat sheet, now I know they threw one, there was a penalty. After the second quarter, when your defense keeps making play after play after play, when Michigan knows that you're crowding the box and they're still running it, trying to chew up the clock rather than be aggressive, what is obvious to me is that like that game was there for the taking for Penn State. And so the frustrating part, the game is there for the taking. In a situation, you're at home, the other head coach is sitting at a hotel and you cannot take advantage. Think about this is what I think frustrates me the most. Couple things. One, the play calling and the schematics were embarrassing. Okay. And I don't claim to be X's and O's guy. We talk about that all the time on the show. But when the offense, every single possession, when, by the way, you're supposed to have literally the best quarterback that you've ever had, the play calling pretty much the entire game, when you know the other team doesn't want to throw the ball, they're just trying to get out with a win. It seemed like every single possession was run on first down. You pick up 4, 5, 6 yards. Then they know you're running on second down because you have second and mid-range, and they get stuffed. And then third down, it's run Drew Aller. And sometimes it works and sometimes. So the play calling was embarrassing. That's one. Just not creative, not unique. You're somehow coaching more scared than the team with the interim head coach on the road. Okay, so that's one. Two, Penn State just has this incredible knack for making the worst possible decisions on the field at the worst possible times. There were so many moments when it felt like the game was about to turn, and then Penn State does something dumb. The big one was obviously I thought actually Franklin made the smart decision to punt, late in the game. And ends up, pinning Michigan back. They got to punt the ball back to you. You should get the ball on the other side of your 50. Instead, you end up having a penalty on the return. Drew Aller has a grounding penalty. And all of a sudden, the best field position you're supposed to have all game long, when the score is a one-possession game, multiple penalties push you back. So the offense isn't very creative. Penalties come at the worst possible time. But really, Saturday was just about James Franklin. It was quite literally, I'm not being facetious, I think it was the worst coaching performance that I have ever seen. Literally every single call, except for maybe that punt I thought was the wrong one, And they all kind of blew up in his face. I said it on Twitter. I said, I think even Jimbo Fisher is embarrassed about how bad James Franklin is doing right now. But just everything he did was wrong. First off, let me say this. Before the half, they score in the final minute. They get some momentum. They cut the lead to, what was it at that point? It would have been, 14-9. And they decide to go for 2. And I'll be blunt. I know the analytics people will tell you that's the right play. It makes sense. I freaking hated it, and I'll tell you why. Analytics takes into account what happens on the field and all these different scenarios, right? What analytics does not account for, though, is what it does if you get it versus if you don't. If you get the 2-point conversion, you cut the lead to 3, that's great on paper. But if you don't get it, you just suck the air out of the stadium after you just scored to make it a 1, to get things close right before halftime. You score right before halftime, you kick the field goal, everybody's fired up going into overtime. Instead, you score, you miss the PAT. It took the entire air out of the stadium. And it certainly didn't help that early in the second half, the play calling got lame and weak as well. Beyond that, the other 2 decisions by James Franklin that were abominable were the 2 late game decisions in the final 5 minutes. The first one, if you somehow didn't watch the game, I mean, I don't know how you've gotten this far without having seen it. But Penn State is down 17-9. It's an 8-point game, a 1-possession game, okay? There's 4 minutes and 21 seconds left. As I just said, Michigan has been playing not to lose essentially the entire game. And I don't blame them, on the road, interim head coach, whatever. But they are not even trying to score the football. All they're trying to do is just pick up enough yards to keep moving the change, to keep the clock moving, to get out of there with a win. And with 4:21 left on your own 30, you go for it on 4th down. When everybody thought, and Joel Klatt, I give him credit, man, he was pretty critical of this on the broadcast. You punt the ball back, you make them go probably another 30, 40 yards just to get into field goal range, but they're probably not going to because your defense has been absolutely incredible. So you don't punt the ball, you go for it. The play call is weird, out of a timeout, by the way. And oh, by the way, you don't get it. What happens? Next play of the game, Blake Corum scores what was ultimately the game sealing touchdown. So you go for it on 4th down. You don't get it. If you had punted, they would have had to go 25, 30, 40 yards just to get into field goal range. Instead, you decide to go for it. 1 play later, they have a 2-score lead. Here's the crazy part, though. Even after all that, with under 4 minutes to go, Penn State actually drove the length of the field and scored. Now, there was an interception that got overturned, but whatever, that's not really the point. The point is, however, that there was a situation late in the game where they score the touchdown. They cut the lead to 24-15. And what does James Franklin do? He goes for 2 again. What are you doing? Like, if you're watching on YouTube, my head just exploded because obviously at that point, it's a 9-point game. Kick the PAT, make it an 8-point game. It's a 1-possession game. If you recover the onside kick, you got to score. If you miss the 2 points, which is exactly what happened, the game's over. The game is essentially over because if you miss the 2 points, you still have to go 2 possessions. Even if you get the onside, it's whatever. It was just such brain dead coaching. And I swear, some of these coaches, they get so far in their own heads. I see it every Sunday with Brandon Staley. And it was the same with James Franklin. I didn't like go for it too early. I didn't like going for too late. You're going for it on your own 30 when Michigan, like, this is what drives me crazy about analytics. There's just no common sense approach of momentum and feel and what's going on in the game. And so all that stuff happens. I thought it was just an abomination of a day for James Franklin. And I'll be blunt, I feel bad for Penn State fans because I don't know how you can come out of the first 10 games of your season feeling anything other than this is never going to happen with this guy as our head coach, right? Because I look at it and I tweeted it. So first of all, James Franklin. Now let's do some quick mental math here before we switch gears and get to the rest of the day in college football. James Franklin. Now everybody knows the record against top 10 teams and top 5 teams or whatever. But this is now year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is his 10th year at Penn State. Okay, and I would argue you were never in position better than you were this year. One, you got the dudes. Abdul Carter was amazing. The defense was amazing. The Dennis Sutton kid, that's the hyphenated last name. He was amazing. Chop Robinson, your best defensive player, maybe a first-round pick, is back for this game after he's missed 2 games. But you have the dudes, one. And think about the scenarios in which they caught Ohio State and Michigan. Yes, Ohio State was on the road, But I promise you, this is the worst offense that Ohio State will ever have, okay? There's no Travion Henderson in that game. Emeka Ibuka barely played. Kyle McCord certainly is not C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields, or the late Dwayne Haskins. Like, he is not that dude. And so you get Ohio State with the worst quarterback and the worst offense that they are ever going to have under Ryan Day. Can't get the win. Then what happens? 3 weeks later, you get Michigan at home. Michigan has all the chaos we just talked about. Michigan literally did not know 2 hours before kickoff if their head coach was going to coach or not. Flies with their head coach. They find out mid-air during the flight that Jim Harbaugh is suspended for 3 weeks. Then they try to file an injunction. Then it's not that, like, and you still can't beat Michigan. And so when I look at Penn State, when I look at James Franklin, I just feel bad for those fans. Because look, it's obviously a situation. We know how this stuff works. One, huge contract, huge buyout, whatever. Two, it's just a really bad place to be in when you know that you have a coach that's going to win you all those big games, but probably isn't going to get you over the hump. And again, if you can't beat Ohio State and Michigan in this season, I don't know how you do it going forward. And to make matters worse, and we've talked about this with all these schools, all these jobs, everything is getting tougher with Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA coming in next year. So I could go on and on. I feel like I've criticized James Franklin enough, but man, oh man, oh man, it was right there for the taking. It was there. Bad play calling. Team making dumb mistakes at the worst possible time. And your head coach just lets you down once again. What a tough day to be a Penn State fan. By the way, don't think it was sign stealing that has led to Michigan's success against you the last few years. You got nobody to look at but yourself in the mirror.